Hey there, fellow citizens of the internet. Welcome to the Moses Kabandana Podcast. Today, I have with me Terry Tucker, and I would like to talk to him about performance under pressure. So, without any further ado, Terry, welcome to the Moses Kabandana Podcast.
Well, Moses, thanks for having me on. I'm really looking forward to talking with you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So, the reason that we're going to talk about performance under pressure is as we were talking before starting recording. You mentioned that sometimes you talk about being a correct me if I'm not doing justice to your title. You are a SWAT Team Hostage Negotiator. Is that correct? Okay.
Correct.
And I don't know anything about that world. I just know that there is some stress involved in it. What is SWAT Team Hostage Negotiator? I mean, it sounds like it's self-descriptive, but can you let us in into this world and let us know what it is?
Sure. So most metropolitan police departments, even some county police departments, have what's called a SWAT team. SWAT stands for Special Weapons and Tactics. And these are the men and women, they're all law enforcement officers, but they have usually the best training, the best equipment, and they're usually the better officers. And so SWAT is usually divided up into two groups. One is a tactical team, and those are the men and women that we used to say have all the toys, the different guns, the armored cars, and the gas and all that kind of stuff. And then there are the negotiators. And we used to always sort of kid the tactical team that if we did our job as negotiators, that they didn't get to use all their toys and things like that. But we're all comprised of SWAT. We're all in the SWAT team, for lack of a better term. And so we usually get called out in the event of a high-risk search warrant where we know there are guns or people that are wanted, where somebody barricades themselves in a home, an apartment, something like that, in a building with a gun, with a weapon, or where somebody takes hostages and barricades themselves. And those are usually the reasons that we get called out. And like I said, sometimes, we'll be there for an hour. Sometimes we'll be there for 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 hours trying to defuse the situation. The goal of SWAT is it's a life-saving organization. A lot of people think it's something that, you want to go in, you want to shoot people and stuff like that. Absolutely not. You do not want to do that. SWAT is a life-saving organization, and our goal, hopefully, is to get the hostage released, if that's the case, if there are hostages, or to get the person out safely at the end of the negotiation. So that's pretty much how SWAT is configured in most police departments.
Okay. And the thing that stood out to me there was to diffuse the situation. And so what does that mean?
That means to get the person out safely. And I'm sure your audience is probably like, well, of course. You want to get the person out safely. About 90% of the time, we were successful at doing that, which means 10% of the time, the person chose to end their life. And a lot of times that was because, for example, we got a tip that an individual who had committed a homicide, a murder, was holed up in an apartment. We would surround the apartment, and that person knew that if they got caught, they were going to prison for the rest of their life. They would never be a free individual again. And so they made the choice to say, you know what, I don't want that. I'm not going to do that. And they would end their life. And while that was always tragic, I don't mean to sound callous about this, I never lost any sleep over that. And the reason I didn't is for a couple of reasons. Number one, I had incredibly great training. I worked with incredibly great people, and I knew I did everything I possibly could to get that person out alive and get them out safely. But at the end of the day, it was really their decision on how the situation was going to turn out.
So you mentioned that sometimes it can take hours, right? So how do you keep your mission, right, of diffusing the situation, as you mentioned it, in such a high stress environment for that long?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I guess let me
Yeah,
kind of go
yeah.
back and let me ask
Okay.
you a question. What do you think in a relationship is the most important thing in that relationship, regardless of whether it's a husband and wife, whether it's a parent child, whether it's a boss subordinate? What do you think is, if you could capsulize it in one word? And I may be setting you up. You may be
I
able to
mean,
get this.
say
What would you say is the most important thing in a
say
relationship?
communication is the most important one.
Okay. I would say it's trust.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
it's developing trust with another
yeah.
human being. And the reason it took so long, and you're absolutely right, is because I am going into an incredibly high stress situation. I mean, let's face it, if you're talking to me, you're probably having the worst day of your life up to this point. And I'm trying to develop a relationship with you. I'm trying to develop trust with you to get you to trust me to get you out safely. Because if you don't trust me, you're not going to, anything I say is
Right.
baloney. And one of the things that we never did when we were negotiating with somebody, excuse me, was we never lied to them.
Hmm.
So people would say to us, "Hey, look, I'll put the gun down, I'll come out, I'll put the gun down, I'll let the hostages go, and I'll come out. But you've got to promise me that I'm not going to go to jail." And we would have to say to them, "Moses, I'm sorry, but when you do come out, you are going to go to jail." And then we would try to deflect the conversation to something more palatable, something
Yeah.
happier. And the reason we never lied to people was because there was a very good chance, and this happened
Hmm.
several times, where a year from now, or 2 years from now, or 5 years from now, we would be right back negotiating with that exact same person, because the problem or the issue that was the reason why they took a hostage or why they barricaded themselves, that didn't go away. That was
Right.
still there. And at some point down the road, it raised its head again. So if you said, Terry, the last time we talked, you lied
Hmm.
to me. Well, my credibility's gone. You don't trust me
Right.
anymore. And as a result, I'm going to have to step out, and another negotiator is going to have to come in and try to develop that relationship, that trust with you. So trust was an incredibly important thing. And that just didn't happen overnight. It took
Right.
hours to build that trust with that
Hmm.
individual.
I totally agree. I don't like trust. That's a very blanket statement. Don't like it in the sense that it takes so long to build. And it has to, but it takes so little. It doesn't take much to break. And once it's broken, it takes even longer to build. It's like, oh man, it's almost like bad habits. You don't have to go look
Mhm.
out for them. They're just right there. Bad habits. They're just you don't have to to fight to fight to get into a bad habit. They just come naturally. But to get rid of them, it's just like, oh my goodness, you got to put in all this work to get rid of the bad habit. And then the second that you let your guard down, bad habits are they come right back in. So while we're off on this tangent of trust, what do you think is one of the cornerstones in building trust? Is it time? Is it being consistent across time? Is it like what's one of the cornerstones of building trust?
I think you hit on one of the cornerstones when you said a minute ago, communication. I think you were absolutely right. You were right there. You were very close. I think another thing is empathy, and we used to call it tactical
Hmm.
empathy. So it would be like, okay, help me understand why we're here. Help me understand what got us to this
Yeah.
point. Because what that does is, I want to understand why we're here. You may tell me, hey, that person did this and I had to shoot him, I had to kill him, or something like that. Again, I want to understand the
Hmm.
situation, not necessarily agree with you or what you did, but to understand that situation. And I'll give you a formula that we were given when I first started on the SWAT team. And the formula was 7, 38, 55. And that formula had to do with how we communicate with each other. 7% of how we communicate with each other are the words that we use. 38% of how we communicate with each other are the tone of voice that we use with those words. And then 55% of it are our body language and our facial expressions.
Okay.
So think about that as a police officer. 99% of what we did with people was face to face. So you and I pull you over for running a stop sign to give you a ticket. I show up at a bar where there's a fight. Whatever the situation, you and I are interacting face to face. Now I can see things. If I'm talking to you and you're kind of looking around, maybe I see that and say, oh, maybe he's thinking about running or trying to escape. Or if I'm talking to you and you're balling up your fists, maybe you want to fight me. So I can see that and I can act appropriately. I can sit you down. I can handcuff you. I can put you in the back of my car, whatever is appropriate for the reason that I'm there. But as negotiators, we were not with the person that we were dealing with. We were a lot of times blocks away talking on the phone or behind a locked door where we're communicating. So what we didn't have was that 55%. So I may say something to you and I didn't see you, roll your eyes and think, oh, what an idiot. I can't believe he said that. I didn't have that luxury. So we had to get good at basically certainly understanding things from a perspective of what people said, but also what they didn't say and how they said it. And there were many times when you talk about developing trust and trying to build that trust where we would be like over here talking about something when the real issue was over here, but you didn't trust me enough yet to talk about the real issue. So we're going to be over here talking about all kinds of basically garbage that doesn't pertain to anything at all. The other thing I'll end this with is the types of questions that we would use. One, they would be open-ended. And two, they would be how and what questions. We stayed away from why questions because, Moses, if I'm talking to you and I say, well, Moses, why did you do that? Didn't you kind of get a feeling that was like, oh, wait a minute, is he accusing me of something or is he saying that I did something wrong? So we tried to stay away from why questions because they sound accusatory. Instead of saying, hey, why are we here, Moses? I could have said, what got us to this point, Moses? So how and what questions, without you realizing it, engage you to help me get you out? Well, how am I supposed to do that, Moses? Well, wait a minute. Now you're thinking how I'm supposed to do that. And you may offer me a suggestion that I hadn't thought of and things like that. So those are some of the things that we used to do and how we use that to develop trust.
Okay. Well, thank you for breaking that down. It's more specifically like breaking down those layers within the framework of communications, right? You said it was 7, 35, and 55? 38 and 55.
38 and 55.
Man, 7% is just the words that we use, huh? That's minuscule. That's very small. Man.
It is. I mean, think about if you and I are talking, you're talking to me and I'm sitting here with my arms folded. What does that say to you? It's like he doesn't care. I mean, that's closed body language. He doesn't care what I had to say. Or you're talking and I'm texting. What does that say? You don't have my full attention. That's body language. That's facial. Or you say something and I'm. It's like, well, he didn't believe what I just said, or he thinks I'm crazy for saying.
And
I haven't said
the intonation part.
I haven't said a word, but I've.
I like that you added how we say things, the tone that we use. Because if you say something and I say okay, that can be I can also say okay. I can also say okay. Now, it's like the same word, but how I say it is it's gonna make you either feel like I'm challenging your authority. You might feel like I'm being dismissive. I mean, it's just the word "okay" itself. It just doesn't mean much. But then how I say it, and then once you accompany that with the facial expression, it's just you have a much bigger picture there.
Exactly. You do. And one of the things that we were taught, and I think you're taught this in just in being a police officer in general, is to be curious. Is to, you would say something, really?
Right.
And just saying that, I mean, it's like, really? And the other thing we would do is, it was called parroting when I was doing it, it's called mirroring now, is you would say something, and I would listen, and then I would repeat back to you either the most important word or the most important 2 or 3 words that you said. So I don't know. So, you're telling me, you say something. This car is got 40,000 miles on it. I might say 40,000 miles.
Right.
And but the important thing about that is to use the silence.
Yeah.
Is to use silence to your benefit. Because if I just say 40,000 miles and then I don't say anything, we are uncomfortable with silence when we're having a discussion. Yeah. If you and I sat here on this podcast and just looked at each other and didn't say anything, your audience would be like, what are these guys doing? I mean, they're not, but that silence we use to our benefit, because by me saying 40,000 miles and saying nothing, that will get you to start talking again. And that's exactly what I want to happen. Man.
We as a species, we're so weird. Because I was gonna ask you to talk about the importance of silence, and you just went right into it. Because silence can, cliche, but it speaks volumes. And in this case, it prompts for more information. And like every once in a while, I'll catch myself. I'm the type that I speak a lot, but also, if a question is like hard enough, at least I suppose, I will just blankly stare into space. And for some people, they might be uncomfortable with that silence, and they might start talking some more. And in my head, I'm like, no, just give me a minute. I'm trying to find the words here. Okay, silence, repeating the last part, or the most important part of their statement, to prompt more information out of them. But on your end, as the person that is in this situation, and you're trying to stay calm, you're trying to stay calm, right? Let me just make the assumption that you're in a situation where you don't know if this person's gonna run. You don't know if this person, they're already uncomfortable because they're interacting with law enforcement, and you don't know what their relationship with law enforcement is, so they might already be fidgety. You don't know what's going on, but is it reasonable to say that there's some level of nervousness on your end? And if so, how are you managing that nervousness so that it does not come across to the other person? Because if they're already nervous, and then they perceive or they see that the officer is also nervous, and your nervousness might come across to them as too agitated, too aggressive. I don't know. So how are you managing? And that's the question here. How are you managing your own nervousness and keeping it from being seen, like physically?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think part of it is training.
Okay.
We are trained. They put us in different scenarios, different situations. When I was a negotiator, that's exactly how we trained to negotiate with people. We would do scenarios. Somebody would pretend to be a bad guy. Somebody would pretend to be a hostage. And then when it was over, we would debrief. Right. Well, and we worked with a psychologist who worked with us. And the psychologist might say, well, did you think this person maybe was schizophrenic and they were off their medication? And you'd be like, man, that never occurred to me. I never thought about that. And so now I've got a piece of information that I didn't have before. So I think training is one thing. The other thing is experience. The older you get, the more experience you get, the more dealing with people you come across, and whether it's dealing with victims that have just been victimized by a crime, or suspects that may have committed a crime, or just the general public. Hey, how's it going? I mean, we could talk to anybody we wanted to. And I don't, not a lot today, but occasionally I'll have people reach out to me and say, hey, I'm interested in going into a career in law enforcement. Do you have any suggestions? And what I always recommend to them is put down your devices. Go out on the street and talk to the homeless person. Go up to the penthouse and talk to that person. Because if you can talk to people, you can be successful in law enforcement. If you can't, if the only way you can communicate an idea or a message is to sit on your phone and text it to somebody, you will be very frustrated in that job, because there's a lot of, again, going back to what we were talking about before, curiousness. Oh, really? Because everybody lies to you as a cop. Right. Everybody, even the people that are on the right, they'll lie to you, or the correct side. They'll lie to you because they want you to believe their story, so you'll take the other person to jail, or you'll cite the person, or whatever it ends up being. And so you have to ask questions. Really? Well, wait a minute. You just said to me a minute ago this happened. Oh. And again, being curious, using that curious voice, using silence, asking a question, and you getting all frustrated about it, and me not saying anything, just letting you get frustrated and see where you go with that.
So
maybe I'm going to learn something.
Yeah, this might be a curveball, or it might be a completely different deviation here. But how do you differentiate communication with negotiation? So let's say, like, all negotiation is communication, but not all communication is negotiation. So I think that's correct, right? I think, that makes sense in my head. So when you're aside from the, like, outside of the law enforcement type world, like, you're out and about doing your daily life, right? How do you remove yourself? And I haven't even touched or asked questions specifically about being a hostage negotiator. So just outside of that, like, how do you as an individual, with friends, with family, with random people, how has being a hostage negotiator improved your ability to just yap left and right with the average folk?
Yeah, it's funny, we have all this training, and we do all these scenarios, and we have experience in that, and then you go home and your kid does something and it all goes right out the window. You're yelling at him as a parent. You're like, oh my gosh, I know better than that. Why did I possibly do that? And that's the emotional part of it. And the reason hostage negotiation, one, took hours, and two, was so emotionally draining on us, was because you had to get down in the weeds. You had to get down in the mud with these people. For example, Moses, if somebody said, or they're ranting and raving, yelling and screaming about their father, and I come back to them with, sounds like you're a little upset with your father. I totally missed that. I totally missed what they're trying to say. I need to come back with them and be like, you are pissed at your father. I need to get down there with them. So I am pissed. Terry gets me. Okay, now we're developing that trust. Now we're developing that relationship where I can get to a point down the road, usually hours later, about coming out. And the importance, and I think you mentioned this a minute ago, the importance of listening to understand versus listening to respond. And I think today we are so caught up in this, hurry up, Moses, say what you're going to say because I want to get my 2 cents in. That's listening to respond versus, okay, Moses, I hear what you're saying. I may agree with you. I may not agree with you. But help me to understand where you're coming from. Now we're creating a relationship. We're interacting as 2 human beings. We're developing trust. Like I said, I may not agree with you, but at least you feel that I care enough to say, okay, where you're coming from. Help me understand where you're coming from.
No, that's something very, very interesting to even repeat, because I still do this relatively often. But especially when I'm in an argument, a debate, more of a debate, less of an argument, where by the time you start talking, I'm listening, I hear you, but I already have my response ready. I'm just waiting for you to finish talking so that I can give you my 2 cents, as you said. And earlier I had mentioned that I'm putting more and more into practice the idea of, okay, they just said something. Let me repeat what they just said. Let me rephrase even what they just said to their satisfaction. I don't do it that often. I need to do it more. But it's like, so coming from what I would call one extreme of, all right, hurry up, I already have my response ready, to, okay, wait. We actually need to pay attention to what they're saying, and actually, because we're gonna need to repeat it to them. Not only that, but we need to repeat it so much, like in a way that they would agree that our repetition is accurately representative of what they said. And it's like, it forces me to like really, really slow down. And it's really, really important. I don't do it enough, but the few times, and it can get annoying. It can get annoying if like, not from my side, because I'm trying to practice it. From the receiving end, it's like, why does this guy have to repeat everything that I said all the time? I just kind of, it is not natural in the everyday interaction, but it is an important skill to have. Anything you want to add more to that?
But can I elaborate on that? So you made an incredibly great point, and I think it is. Yeah, I think it builds trust. It builds on that relationship. If you say something like, "What I'm hearing you say is," right, and then you say in your words what you heard them say, because it makes them feel like, oh, he's listening. And if you say something that's wrong, if you say, no, that's not what I meant by that, I meant this, again, it's like he's trying to get me. He's trying to understand me. And again, that's communication. You asked me a minute ago about negotiation and communication. Communication is you and I understanding what we're trying to say. Negotiating is I'm trying to get something from you. I'm trying to get you out safely. I'm trying to get a hostage out safely. Yeah. But I think the important thing is, and we haven't talked about this, is you have to be genuine. You can't be fake. You can't be, oh, this guy's just giving me a line of baloney that is wrong and stuff like that. They have to believe that you're in this with them. And I think that's true in any relationship, whether it's your spouse or your significant other, your kids, your boss. Are we in this together, or are you just like, you're the boss and it doesn't matter what I say? Yeah. If that's the case, then there's no trust. I don't trust you. I just think you're out for you. But if you say, well, Terry, what I'm hearing you say is this. Yes, that's right. That's what I meant. Or no, I didn't mean it that way. I meant it this way. Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh, he's trying to get me. He's trying to understand whatever.
Yeah, and at the absolute least, what that does is it gets, or it doesn't eliminate, but it reduces the you talking and I'm talking and you talking, and our voices are raising. You're raising your voice, I'm raising my voice, and that alone is enough to make me not want to listen to you, and vice versa. But the minute that you take the time to respond, not to respond to me, but to repeat what I said, I'm ready to figure out, okay, are you gonna get it wrong? Are you gonna misrepresent what I said? And in doing that, it forces me to stay silent, to listen. Right? So it's like it removes that what do you call it? Over talking on each other. Yeah, the barrier, but also like we're not talking over each other.
Right, we're not screaming at each other, because when we do that, neither one of us can understand what we're happening. But the other part of that is identifying the feeling, identifying the emotion. Moses, you seem really upset today, and we would do this with people, and people always used to, if somebody had a gun and we felt they were suicidal, we would call them out on it right away. It would be like, hey, Moses, are you thinking of hurting yourself? Yeah. Are you thinking of shooting yourself with that gun? And people used to say, you can't do that because you're gonna put that idea in their mind. No, you're not. No, you're not. If they're not thinking about it, me saying it isn't gonna make them, oh yeah, Terry thinks I should shoot myself. Okay. No. But if you are thinking about it, by me addressing it, by me calling it out, a lot of times it opens the door a little bit where it's like, yeah, he understands me. He knows I'm desperate. Okay, maybe I want to trust this guy. Or maybe, so I always tell people, you don't have to be a hostage negotiator or a police officer. If you think somebody's suicidal, call them out on it. Hey, Moses, are you thinking of hurting yourself? Because if you're not, you're going to say, oh, Terry, you're an idiot. No, I'm not going to do that at all. Right. But if you are, I may have just opened that door for you to say, oh my God, yes. Thank you. Thank you for caring. Thank you for noticing. Thank you for seeing this. And now maybe you're going to prevent them from harming themselves.
Okay, that's quite insightful. We're like almost half an hour into this already, and I didn't ask you, like, how did you end up on this path? Like, how did you end up as a hostage negotiator?
Yeah, I became a police officer late in life. My grandfather was a Chicago police officer from 1924. Boy, talking about going back. 1924 to 1954. Yeah. And he was actually shot in the line of duty with his own gun. It was not a serious injury. He was shot in the ankle. But my dad, who was an infant at the time when his father was shot, always remembered the stories that my grandmother told of that knock on the door of Mrs. Tucker, grab your son, come with us. Your husband's been shot. So when I expressed an interest of going into law enforcement, my dad was absolutely not. You're going to college. You're going to major in business. You're going to get out, get a great job, get married, have 2.4 kids, and live happily ever after. But that's what my dad wanted me to do. That's not what I felt my purpose in life was. So when I graduated from college, I had a choice. I could have said, hey, Dad, my dad was dying of cancer. I could have said, sorry, Dad, I'm going to go blaze my own trail and do what I want to do. Or out of love and respect for you, I will do what you want me to do. And that's what I did. My first 2 jobs were in business. I was in the corporate headquarters in the marketing department of Wendy's International, the hamburger chain. And then I was a hospital administrator. And so I became a 37-year-old rookie police officer, which by most accounts is pretty old to be getting into that line of work. But I wanted to do it. I kept the dream alive for me. I waited till my father passed away, and then I followed my own dreams. And then once I got into law enforcement, like you and I were talking about earlier, SWAT are usually the best officers with the best equipment and the best training. And I've always in my life wanted to be associated with, wanted to be part of the best. So when there was an opening, I applied for it, and I was able to get on the SWAT team.
Okay, let me take a small tangent here and try to see how the average folk can apply this. So, for let's say an 18-year-old that is finishing high school, right, and they happen to be in the same or similar situation, where they can pursue the thing that they think that they would like to do, or that they know that they would like to do, and or pursue the dream that the parents or their community wants them to follow. How does one, without insulting the dignity of the parents or the community, how do they negotiate properly, right? And say, hey, respectfully, I would like to I don't know, spend the rest of my life in the jungle doing X, Y, and Z instead of going to college, or whatever that might be. Like, hey, I know you want me to do this and this, and you have the best intentions. However, I'm gonna do X, without insulting the dignity of the person that wants the best for them. How would an 18-year-old go about negotiating this conundrum?
Okay. I don't know. I you put a conundrum out there that I don't know if I have the answer to that. I think you have to. I think we all have a purpose in life. Viktor Frankl wrote a great book called Man's Search for Meaning. He was a concentration camp survivor during World War II. And he said, you have a moral obligation to find your purpose in life and live it. Now, what I felt my purpose was to be in law enforcement. My father didn't want me to do that. And you made a great point. My father didn't want me to do that because he was being mean or vindictive. he did that because he loved me. I want something better for you. I want an easier life, an easier job for you. I think, first of all, you have to keep your dream alive. You have to keep your purpose in life alive. And I think a lot of people don't do that. I don't think, number one, they never try to find their purpose. And even if they do, they quit, they give up on it because it's hard. It's hard to get there. I guess you just have to be honest and have enough courage to say, Mom, Dad, Grandma, Grandpa, Aunt, Uncle, whoever that person is who's pushing you in those directions. And I know I'm not alone. I know a lot of people in my life that, you know, my father wanted this or my grandparents wanted me to do this and stuff like that. But that's not what I felt I was supposed to do. I think you just have to be honest and say, look, I love you. I know that you are trying to do what you feel is right for me, but you've raised me to be a good, kind, caring, self-sufficient, smart individual. And I feel I'm supposed to do this. Now, it may not go well. Your parents may get upset. Your grandparents may get upset. It may not go well. But I think you just have to be honest and have enough courage to say, this is what I'm supposed to do, and I'm going to go do it.
Okay. So there's a lot less negotiation there. So let me amp it up a little bit.
Sure.
Negotiating with yourself can be a bit tricky, right? So let me be a bit more specific and frame it into a question then. Let's say you're doing thing A, right? And it's getting really hard. And within the confines of the topic of performing under pressure, you're pursuing career A and it's getting really, really difficult. And there's this thing that you really want to do, that you've wanted to do. And it's also hard, right? So, okay. The question is, let me do the question first. How do you differentiate, how do you know that you're quitting because something is hard versus you're quitting because it's not a thing that you're meant to do? And how do you negotiate with yourself? And I'm going to give myself an example. The way that I go about it is, if I'm pursuing thing A and I want to quit because I want to do thing B, but I don't want to think myself as a quitter. The thing B that I want to switch to, it has to be just as hard or harder than the thing A. That's how I would know that I'm not quitting, because it's hard. So that's an internal negotiation that I have with myself. So for others, how do you recommend someone to figure out within themselves whether they're quitting because something is hard, or whether they're quitting because they really have no interest in that? I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it makes perfect sense. Absolutely. First of all, I would say never quit something just because it's hard. You know, hard makes you better. Easy, you don't grow. You don't improve. But let me give you an example. I read a book, and I can't remember the title of the book, but it was written by a man by the name of Jason Pfeiffer. And he is the editor-in-chief of Entrepreneur magazine. And he talks about how when he graduated from college, he went to work for a small town newspaper, but he wasn't happy. He wanted to be an editor. He wanted to be an editor of a newspaper, a magazine, some type of publication. So what he did was he went to work for a company and he learned a certain type of editing.
Okay.
And once he learned that, he got a job at another company. So he quit. He's like, okay, I've learned what I need to learn here. Now I need to go to another company and learn a different type of editing. And when he learned that type of editing, he quit that job and he went to work for another company to learn another type of editing, and eventually became the editor of Entrepreneur magazine. So I think what's important is, don't quit because it's hard. Quit because you've learned what you need to learn there, and it's time to move on and learn something else. I always tell, when I speak to groups, especially young people, I always tell young people, if there's something in your heart, something in your soul that you believe you're supposed to do, but it scares you, go ahead and do it. Because at the end of your life, the things that you're going to regret are not going to be the things you did. They're going to be those things that you didn't do, and by then it's going to be too late to go back and do them. So if you're going to quit because you've learned what you need to learn and then it's time to move on. Don't quit just because it's hard. If you stay and stick it out because it's hard and you haven't learned everything, you will grow as a human being.
That is a beautiful insight. Now, let's bring it back to the hostage negotiation here. And let's make a make-believe situation that someone is trying to, let's say, quit themselves, and you're there, right? How do you approach a situation like this when someone's trying to quit from this thing that we call life?
Yeah, that's a great question, because there were a lot of times where we had no idea why we were there. We had no idea why the person had barricaded themselves with a gun. And so there was a primary negotiator, somebody that was talking or trying to talk to that person. And then sitting right next to them was another negotiator who had headphones on and was listening to the whole conversation. And then there were 3 or 4 or 5 other negotiators that were doing what I used to call working the crowd. They're trying to get intelligence. Why are we here? What happened? What precipitated this? Anything you get. So as a primary, you may be talking to this person, and your secondary may hand you a note that says, don't talk about his mother. Because what the people on the ground found out was he had this huge fight with his mother, and he barricaded himself and took a gun. Right. And now he wants to kill himself because, I'll show you. I'll show you, Mom. And that was that was something that happened a lot with people who wanted to commit suicide. They would say to us, hey, just let me talk to my mother for a minute. Just let me talk to my mother. And we never let them do that. We never let them talk to their mother, their father, their spouse, their kids, whatever. Because it was always, as soon as I talk to my mother, boom, I'm going to do it. Right. And it's more like, I showed you I actually did it. So we never let them talk to that person, to those people. So you have to figure that out, develop trust, and then you have to get to a point where, look, I don't want you to do this. I want us to find a solution. Again, I never introduced myself as, hi, I'm Officer Tucker. It was always, hey, Moses, I'm Terry. Let's talk.
Yeah.
How you doing? That kind of thing. Developing that relationship. Sometimes you did. Sometimes you didn't. Sometimes it just didn't work. No matter what you said, no matter what you were going to do, they were going to end their life. It didn't matter. But you tried every trick in the book. And it wasn't tricks. We weren't trying to trick people. But we were trying to get people to find a reason to continue to live. Whether it was their kid. It's like, you had this big fight with your wife and you hate her and she's going to get a divorce and all that kind of stuff. But you know what? You've got an amazing 5-year-old daughter. Think about how that daughter's going to feel if you end your life and she's not going to grow up with her dad. So you try to find and this is going to sound bad, you try to find a hook. Yep. You try to find something that you could get them to hook onto that said, okay, that's important to me. Yeah, my wife and I may have had this big fight. She may be leaving me. She may have a boyfriend on the side, whatever horrible situation it is. But the love is this 5-year-old girl. Yep. So I don't have a good answer for your question.
No, it makes sense. Makes sense. Because what I was trying to get to is that is a highly stressful situation, right? For you, for them as well, right? And correct me if I'm wrong, but essentially you're trying to give them enough tools for them to get themselves out of the situation, right? Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, people used to say to us, great job, you talked this person out. And we used to say, we didn't talk them out. We listened them out. We let them do most of the talking. We just interjected questions to keep them talking. Because if you think about how this went, we all played on a teeter-totter or a seesaw at the park when we were growing up. When we started negotiating with the person, their emotional brain was way up in the air and their rational brain was way down on the ground. And over time, by asking them these open-ended questions and getting them to talk and burn off a lot of that emotional energy, eventually you get that teeter-totter to equilibrium.
Okay.
And then through more conversation, through more trust, through more empathy, you get to the point where their rational brain is way up in the air and their emotional brain is way down on the ground. Because bottom line is, we make better decisions for ourselves if we use our rational brain as opposed to our emotional brain.
Yeah, that is so relatable because just a few, maybe 6 weeks ago, 7 weeks ago, I was taking flight lessons. I just became a pilot a couple weeks ago. Thank you. And so I had been soloing, like flying by myself for maybe 2.5 weeks, and I'm coming back to my home airport, and all of a sudden there's severe weather that I hadn't predicted yet, right? And my emotions are just off the roof, right? Like, oh my goodness, I don't even have my license yet, and I don't know what's going on, and there's a thunderstorm, and I'm looking at the weather radar, and my instructor at the time, he's at the home airport, and he's texting me like, hey, our situation here is not looking that good, and the airport that I had left is like too far. I mean, it's just like all these emotions that are happening. And then I figured, wait a minute, I'm really freaking out right now. But this airplane is not gonna land itself, no matter how much I freak out. It's not gonna happen. I can freak out all I want, just the plane will not land itself. So I ended up contacting another airport that was nearby, and they helped me deviate and land there, which was only 8 minutes out of the way. Just landed there, stayed there for about an hour and a half, let the storm come through, and then got back in and flew another 10 minutes to the airport. But what you just said there of emotions being here and rationale being down here, and then having to bring those, into that seesaw, it had to happen, because if I had, like I said, I could have continued to freak out as much as I wanted. The plane would never have landed by itself under those emotional conditions. At some point, the logical, rational part of the brain had to realize that and then take over. And I can't continue make the best decision from there on. So anything that you want to add more to that emotional rationale balance?
No, I think that's, we make better decisions when we use our rational brain. When we're emotional, it's kind of like what you asked me. I've got all this training, I've got all this experience, and then I go home and my kid dumps milk on the kitchen floor. And now all of a sudden, I'm not operating from, I'm a parent, but I'm operating from a point of emotion as opposed to a point of rational. Okay, my kid dumped milk on the floor. Is it the end of the world? No, but I'm tired, or I don't feel good, or whatever. And that all sort of compounds and piles on you, and you lash out. You say something that you wish you hadn't, or you yell at them, or you spank them on the butt, or whatever it is. And then you realize, oh, what an idiot I was. I'm the parent here. My kid's acting more rational than I am in this situation. And that's just it. But that's hard to do. We are emotional creatures. That's what separates us in a lot of cases from the other animals. We have emotions that we can love, we can be depressed, we can feel sorry for people, we can have empathy. All those things that a lot of times other animals don't have, or they may have one of those or two of those or something like that. We're all about emotion, but you make better decisions. I mean, think about a car. What do salespeople do when they're trying to sell you a car? They hook you with the emotion. Oh man, I can see myself in that car behind the wheel. My friends will think, boy, that guy looks great. And all. They're hooking you with the emotion. You may be like, I'm not spending that much money for that car. That's the rational side of you coming out saying, oh yeah, this isn't a good move. He's using the emotion to try to get me to buy this car. And I'm trying to use the rational side to say, that's not a good investment.
Yeah. And there's I know we're already like past an hour here, just this hour like flew by. But I was having this conversation with a couple of people a few weeks ago, and it occurred to me that like the biggest things that bring humans together, literally, physically, in one physical space. One is music, and then the other one is a bunch of men running behind a ball. Logic, I don't know if logic enters the equation here at any point, right? But it's something that just brings us together, and it's so much emotion, so much like non-rational things that are happening, and it's like it's part of what makes us humans, right? It's a huge highlight to our species. So we don't want to like neglect the importance of those, but I think within the context of performing under pressure, yeah, you're right. You want to reduce those the impact of your emotions.
Yeah, you should never make you should never make a decision when you're in an emotional state, especially an important decision. You know, buying a car, buying a house, getting married, all those kind of stuff. If you're emotional, something good's happened, something bad's happened, wait, give it some time, let those emotions kind of burn off, and then look at it rationally and say, should I still buy that car? Should I still buy that house? Should I still get married?
Yeah, I made an emotional purchase not long ago. I went, dude.
We all have.
It was crazy. I went into the Apple store to get, I think it was like a phone case or something, and I walked out with this stupid thing, and it's like, now I justified it, right? Because like I said, I was just taking a pilot school at the time, and I really needed it. I told myself, and I needed it. It was good, but did I really need it as much as my emotions were telling me that? Not really. Quick question here. It's gonna be a little off the track. How old were you, and like what is your absolute earliest memory that you have?
I was probably maybe 3 years old. My parents had bought their first house. It was in Chicago, and my parents had bought this wading pool. It was just a small pool, maybe a foot and a half, 2 feet high, circular. And my dad was 6'5", so he was a big guy. And I just remember him laying in the pool in the summertime. His legs were hanging off the side because it wasn't big enough for him. And my brother and I would just be jumping in the pool and jumping on him and all that kind of stuff. It was, I still remember it. It was still so much fun just as kids. We didn't have a care in the world. It was just about having a good time with our dad. And so that's probably my earliest memory.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing the memory. Anything that you want to end with?
I'll end with this. This may be a little off point, but I think it's important for all of us to consider. I've been battling cancer for 11 years. I had my foot amputated in 2018. I had my leg amputated in 2020. And recently I had a nurse ask me, what was it like to have your foot amputated, to have your leg amputated? Well, I got my dad's height. I'm 6'8" tall, so I'm a little bit taller than my dad. So learning to walk again when you're this tall, falling is not an option. You fall, you get hurt from this height. But what I told her was, cancer can take all my physical faculties, but cancer can't touch my mind, it can't touch my heart, and it can't touch my soul. That's who I am. That's who you are, Moses. That's who everybody who's listening to us really is. And we spend a lot of time working on this body, this vessel, this home. We go to the gym, we eat right, we got to get enough rest, we've got to reduce stress. And I'm not telling you not to do that. I think you absolutely should do that. But what I am suggesting is maybe every day, spend a little time working on who you really are, your heart, your mind, and your soul. This body, we all know, is going to die, it's going to decay, it's going to go away. But what will live on, what will be eternal, will be your heart, your mind, and your soul. And I think as human beings, we don't spend nearly as much time every day working a little bit on those important things.
Building the mind, building the heart, and the soul. Terry Tucker, thank you so much for coming to the Moses Kabandana Podcast.
Well, Moses, thanks for having me on. I really enjoyed talking with you.
I forgot to ask. Is there? Do you have some social media that people can go find you at?
Sure. Yeah, I have a website called Motivational Check. Every day I put up a thought for the day. On Mondays I put up the Monday morning motivational message. I have recommendations for books to read, videos to watch. You can leave me a message. That's all at motivationalcheck.com.
Motivationalcheck.com. Terry, thanks so much for coming to the Moses Kabandana Podcast again.
Thank you, Moses. I appreciate it.